The film opens in 1947 with a dog named Paul anxiously trying to check on a disturbance. His human follows him outside and witnesses him happily being crushed by a UFO. 60 years later, two English tourists have traveled to America to attend the annual San Diego Comic-Con. Clive's an aspiring science fiction author who's unwilling to pay $1,300 for a sword called the Black Vampire. His best friend Graeme draws the art, which is complemented by the famous author Adam Shadowchild. After capturing the memory, they go back to the hotel where room service just assumes the two are lovers. They inform the help that they're taking a road trip to all the sites of extraterrestrial importance in the Southwest, but the foreigner just seems nervous at the mention of aliens. The next day they set off in their rented RV, leaving the hotel valet to be ripped off by some dirty orcs. Reenacting famous scenes from their favorite shows, the two eventually stop in Nevada to get some over-the-top milkshakes. The bar has a UFO theme, but the owner Pat doesn't get many geeks visiting, mostly just truckers and hunters like Gus and Jake. Graeme tries to keep it low-key, but Clive returns from the bathroom in his regular jolly mood. The two skedaddle before any trouble starts, but they accidentally reverse into the hunter's truck on the way out. Later that evening, they stop at a famous place for harboring meetings of UFO types called the Black Mailbox, when headlights begin racing up the hill in the distance. Believing it to be the hunters, they speed off in their RV, but it turns out to be somebody completely different, who suddenly rolls off the highway right in front of them, totaling the car. When Graeme and Clive investigate the crash, a small alien emerges from the shadows, causing Clive to collapse in shock. The extraterrestrial insists to Graeme that he didn't do anything to him and that he isn't here to probe them. He introduces himself as Paul, saying it's a nickname that stuck after he crash-landed on the dog. He speaks perfect English and is in desperate need of their help, so Graeme agrees to give him a ride to where he's going while Clive sleeps it off. Paul explains that the government strip-fed his appearance throughout the years in fiction, to help us feel more comfortable when we finally meet them, which is why he looks so obviously alien. This doesn't help though, as Clive attempts to strangle Paul the moment he wakes up, assuming he's an invader, but is calmed down by his friend. Shortly after leaving the crash, a government agent named Zoil informs his superior that he's closing in on the alien. She tells him to eliminate the two tourists by making it look like an accident, and organizes for two local agents, O'Reilly and Haggard, to intercept them up ahead. Graeme and Clive hit the checkpoint and are inspected by O'Reilly, but he's distracted when learning that they met Adam Shadowchild. With the added distraction of Graeme's tri-breasted art, and without being told the nature of what they're even meant to be looking for, the moronic agents allow them to pass, assuming them just a touring gay couple. Continuing on their journey, it turns out Paul was hiding from the agents in plain sight with the ability to go invisible, just like the Predator. For a science fiction author, Clive behaves the opposite of what you'd expect, and seems very negative and against the whole experience. Paul refuses to tell them where he's going for their own safety when suddenly a bird plows into the windshield. With the boys feeling sorry for the poor creature, the alien uses his powers to bring it back to life, then eats it as he prefers his food to be kickin'. That morning, Zoil catches up with the agents, who are currently in the middle of a game of hide and seek. While listing everything they noticed during the night, Clive's urine-covered jeans gives him away as the target, as Zoil knows it was probably because of Paul. The three boys decide to pull into a motor park for the night, and upon entry meet the owner's daughter, Ruth. She's a cycloptic Christian who wears a t-shirt of Jesus shooting Darwin and lives with her abusive father Moses. Ruth's only missing a peeper because her father didn't take her to a doctor when she was 4, believing the Lord would heal it. That night the trio bond around a grill, and Paul explains that he was here on a science mission for his planet when he crashed. The young girl pulled him from the wreckage and saved his life, but the military carted him away and locked him up in Area 51. For 60 years he's been advising the government in all manner of scientific achievements, including giving Steven Spielberg the idea for E.T., and inventing the character of Mulder on X-Files. While dancing around the campsite, Paul's almost spotted by Ruth, but she's called away by her father. The next morning, when she confronts them about having a third member in their party, Paul pretends to be a human using the bathroom. The boys and Ruth begin to have a disagreement on creationism, when Paul proves that we aren't all created in the image of some higher being by revealing himself, causing her to faint. Assuming that no one would believe her rambling anyway, they send Paul into Ruth's home to steal back Clive's passport given to the park as collateral. He's busted by Moses, who assumes the alien to be a demon and chases him with his shotgun back to the RV. They escape with Ruth still on board, and she wakes up terrified at the sight of Paul, before praying while shouting that he's evil. Graeme insists that the alien's not evil and is just a bit rude, when Paul ends Ruth's rambling by sharing the collective knowledge of the universe through a telepathic link. At his request he also gives it to Graeme, but when offering it to Clive he refuses, calling them spoilers. The agents track them to the park and talk to Moses about his missing daughter. Haggard overhears coded talk between Zoil and his boss, leading him to suspect that they're tracking an alien, which is perpetuated by Zoil continuing to keep them in the dark. Ruth's in denial about Paul existing, until suddenly realizing that this means hell doesn't exist and she's able to sin for the first time in her life. Graeme convinces her to accompany them in getting the alien to where he's going, while Clive and Paul are left alone in the RV. They squash their beef with Clive explaining that his whole life he wanted to meet an alien, and he blew it by passing out. He eventually allows Paul to transfer him the information and collapses head first. With his Miyagi abilities, the higher being then cures Ruth's vision, temporarily transferring the ailment to himself. When the group finally get back on the road, they're followed closely by the agents, as well as Moses, who refused to leave it up to the government to get his daughter back from the demon. With Ruth now cursing every sentence she can, they pull over to get something to eat and she narrowly misses her father exiting the bathroom. Jake and Gus just happen to be there and begin harassing the new girl until they run into the boys. Due to their truck, an all-out brawl ensues, but the boys are able to escape into the car park, as well as Ruth, who has a run-in with her father until he's smacked from behind. The hunters pursue the trio outside and knock Clive out, but are stopped in their tracks by Paul, who threatens them with a probing. The four escape and pull up outside of a small town for the night, where Graeme and Ruth almost kiss but are interrupted by Paul reappearing. While having a good time around the campfire, Paul explains his reason for escaping was that he discovered he outlived his usefulness as a receptacle of knowledge for the government, and they were going to surgically remove his brain in an attempt to learn more. Thankfully, he has a friend inside Area 51 who helped him escape, and he sent an SOS to his home planet to rescue him from Earth. The next morning they find that the town's crowded, and since Paul can only go invisible when he holds his breath, they need to disguise him as a child to get back to the RV undetected. Clive's unable to resist the black vampire for a fifth the price of Comic-Con, so they take a detour. The agents are scouring around town looking for them, when O'Reilly encounters Paul inside the comic store but just assumes he's a statue. He can't resist seeing if the lifelike appearance goes all the way down, and finds himself groping a real alien. Clive attempts to cover with Haggard, but he spots Paul and is knocked down by Clive before he can fire. At the same time, Zoil's checking RVs and finds what he's looking for, but he doesn't recognize Ruth as the sweet Christian daughter with her new foul mouth and both her eyes. When he gets back to his agents, Haggard gets up in his face with the truth, so Zoil shuts all that down by forcing him at gunpoint to return to headquarters. The Scooby Gang pull into a fireworks store and swipe some to set off at the landing site. Before they get there, Paul has them pull over at the nearby farmhouse of the girl who saved him in 47. Tara is now an old woman and is shocked to see Paul after spending the last 60 years trying to convince herself she was hallucinating. She spent her entire life being ridiculed for claiming that an alien killed her dog and locked herself away because of the harassment she received. Tara is eventually just grateful that Paul exists, and she knows herself she wasn't crazy. Just then Zoil rings the doorbell, but the agents have followed him and begin to raid the home. All hell breaks loose as Paul flashes Zoil, sending him crashing to the ground. Haggard gets the drop on Paul and Clive, but Graeme blindsides him with a frying pan and they flee to the RV. Moses shows up and begins shooting alongside a rising Haggard, but when O'Reilly attempts to fire a shot from inside the house, Ruth's left the gas stove on and the house explodes. The group escape with Tara, who's now homeless, and are chased down by Haggard, who's being shot at by Zoil. The agent's now the one taking orders from the big guy as she tells him to catch Paul. Moses catches up to him briefly, but Haggard wings him and continues the pursuit alone. He catches the RV and attempts to fire at Paul, but they push him off the road and over a cliff, killing him in the explosion and leaving just Zoil in pursuit a few miles behind. He gets into an argument with the big guy over his lack of ability to capture Paul, prompting him to shoot the radio and continue the chase. The RV breaks down, so the five are forced to walk the rest of the way, but they're not far from the rendezvous located at the Devil's Tower. They set off the fireworks and begin to wait, when sinister orange lights show up hovering over the nearby trees. Zoil arrives with his carbine and races through the trees towards the lights, seemingly worried that the alien's going to escape. However, they aren't a UFO and is instead a helicopter belonging to Zoil's supervisor. Zoil steps out of the tree line and begins shooting her men when she pulls out a gun of her own and floors him. It's revealed that he was Paul's contact in Area 51 but got separated while helping him escape and has been trying to catch up ever since. Paul and Zoil are such good friends that the alien even introduced the agent to the woman he made his wife. Clive attempts to pull his cheap version of the black vampire, but it breaks. He steps aside for Graeme to punch the big guy, but she takes it on the kisser and fires her own punches back. She defeats the whole group until sneaky Tara catches her with a straight to the face. With everything finally calming down, Paul apologizes for flashing Zoil outside of Tara's house as he didn't realize who he was, when Moses suddenly appears with a shotgun and Bible in hand. Ruth pushes Paul out of the way, but Graeme Ruth, resulting in a blast to the chest that leaves him mortally wounded. He dies telling Clive what a great time he had in America, so naturally Paul attempts to revive his savior, which worries Zoil as something this large could kill him. The wound transfers to Paul and he's shot backwards, leaving him lifeless as Graeme resurrects. Clive and Ruth rush to him while Zoil and Tara rush to Paul, who heals himself and sits up claiming that sometimes you just have to roll the dice. Moses now believes the alien sent by God to heal people, as Graeme and Ruth finally kiss uninterrupted. Suddenly the big guy returns locked and loaded, but is immediately crushed by Paul's arriving rescue team. The aliens make preparations to depart while Paul says his goodbyes to everyone except for Tara. He announces that he plans to take her with him to replace her life with a new one that he owes her. He bids farewell to his two new British friends, telling Clive that he enjoyed reading his book and quoting that you need to spin a good yarn before you can weave a great dream. In a dramatically long takeoff sequence, the alien vessel ascends and rejoins a mothership above them, then takes off back to Paul's homeworld. 2 years later the three humans are attending Comic-Con once again, but this time they're introduced to a crowd by Adam Shadowchild. They're promoting their highly successful graphic novel called Paul, as O'Reilly's shown in the crowd badly scarred but having survived the explosion. And the movie ends.
It's a nickname that stuck. My ship crashed on a dog, it doesn't matter.
So you made it. I appreciate your time. I couldn't have done it without you. Tell your mother I said thanks.